I'd like to make a few points before we begin in part 2 of the EFT course. First of all, please recognize that you've already read the manual. You've seen the first 3 tapes of EFT part 1. It is now time, if you haven't already done so, to listen to the audio tapes. The audio tapes are very important because while we don't teach the tapping points, that's already been done in this course, we do give you a wide variety of people with all kinds of issues. You get a good perspective on what you can apply this to, how to apply it, various approaches which are important, and you also get a good feeling for how people react to it. They react in a variety of ways, and all this is important foundation for you to have under your belt before you proceed with part 2. Also, I want to emphasize something from the 6 Days to VA video that you saw just prior to this particular video. There's a technique we use there which I call tell the story technique. We also call it the movie technique sometimes. And that basically is we had the vets kind of make a movie of a specific event that they had to go through, and then we had them tell the story, and as they narrated this story, whenever they got to an intense part of it, they needed to stop so we could tap. Now, as you remember, we had to do that several times, and I'd recommend you go back and watch that with all the vets that we use that with over and over again, because that's a very important technique for newbies and oldbies alike, to EFT, because it allows you to take a specific event in someone's life and be very thorough with it, because as they go in and tell that story, and you collapse the various pieces of it, the various aspects of it that are important along the way, then as they tell the story again, another aspect comes up, and then tell the story again, and pretty soon they tell the story, and there just are no aspects, and they can tell that story like it was a walk around the block, and that's a very important place to get to, and that particular technique, which I'm urging you to study, will go a long way towards allowing you to be thorough in your work. Earlier on in this EFT course, I urged you to go to our website and print out and study the various articles under the tutorial. One of those articles has to do with the subject called borrowing benefits, which I want to emphasize for you here because you're going to be able to personally use that as these next tapes unfold. Borrowing benefits is a fascinating concept we've learned over time, and that is if you are watching somebody else undergoing EFT, like if you were watching me dealing with someone on an issue of theirs, even though you might have a different issue, if you will simply write down the name of your issue, so it's in your thoughts, write it down, put it on a piece of paper, put it in front of you, and then while I'm dealing with somebody, in this case on the video that you'll be seeing, which may have a totally and completely different issue than yours, oftentimes you'll find because you're tuned into it and you're doing the tapping, and even though you're saying exactly the same words as though you were this other person, and they don't seem to fit for you, we have found with great frequency that you will start collapsing the issues you were dealing with in a very non-intense way. You're actually presumably tapping for somebody else's issue, but we're finding that will help you as well. I mention that to you because as these videos unfold, you're going to see several one-on-one sessions. You might as well just sit there while you are learning the approaches that we're using. Go ahead and tap for yourself, just as though you were that person, with your item written down, your issue written down in front of you, and notice the results. Very helpful tool. I hope you use it. In addition, I want to emphasize something here that is also going to be emphasized, later on in this particular video that you're watching. And that is the item of being specific. We urge you to be specific whenever possible, but I want to give you a useful angle on that. One of the very common mistakes I have found that newcomers to EFT have made is that they will try to address something which seems specific to them, but yet is not specific enough. Example might be, someone would say, my father always abused me. Well, that may seem specific because it's abuse and it's a father, but no. Oftentimes that's too global. It's like trying to chop down an entire forest with one swing of the axe. You need to go to each specific event in that and start pulling out those trees in that diseased forest one by one. For example, You might say, even though my father locked me in the closet for 2 days when I was 12, assuming that happened. That would be a specific event that you would deal with. And then you take another specific event and another one, and then the more global one will start to fail. The generalization effect that I mentioned in the 6 days of the VA tape when I was dealing with Rich, the very first vet there, will work for you in the example that I gave. Now, I want to emphasize that here by going back, and I'm going to emphasize again. You see the 6 days of the VA tape, and specifically with Rich. Now, Rich had what is known as PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, as a result of all of his war traumas. And if you'll recall, I asked him, I said, Rich, how many, on a scale of 0 to 10, how many 10s do you have from your war experience? And he said, oh, I have at least 100. What we did was we dealt with 2 of those events, specific events, right there on tape. One of those was when he walked into a village and saw a pile of decapitated bodies with the heads next to them. Very intrusive memory, caused him nightmares, etc. On the tape, we used the tell the story, the movie technique for you, and we collapsed that one. No longer a problem when he talks about it, thinks about it, etc. Then we used one where he was asleep at night, on the ground, and it was raining, and there was some partially buried bodies he didn't know about, and the rain had the effect of raising them out of the body. And that also was a memory that just would cause him nightmares and intrusive memories and so on. We dealt with that one, that specific event, and collapsed that. We pulled 2 trees out of his war forest. And then he went off and dealt with 3 or 4 on his own, 3 or 4 specific events, and then he came back. And he said he couldn't find the rest of them. Remember, there were over 100. So I want to point that out as a very important tool to use. And gosh, I don't know what the percentage is of people that report to me, oh, well, EFT doesn't work. When I start asking them what they say, I say, well, tell me what you said. Now, give me an example of your language. Even though I what? And they'll say things like, well, even though I have this poor self-image. Well, that's very global. That's not specific events. There's no specificity in that at all. Or, even though my mother doesn't love me. Well, that's another global event, because there are all kinds of specific events underlying my mother doesn't love me, and so on it goes. So if you're not making headway, it's because, in many cases, what you're trying to do is to chop down a whole forest with one. Please be specific. EFT works marvelously a very high percentage of the time if you'll deal with a specific event. The more specific, the better. Just want to make sure you're oriented that direction, before we carried on.
Welcome. This is EFT Part 2. And this tape is going to serve as a bridge between EFT Part 1 and Part 2.
Yeah, the Part 1, we're going to kind of summarize that here. So you have everything we've already talked about in its essence, right here. And then we're going to talk about, again on this tape, what you're going to learn here. All the refinements, this is kind of the advanced section of it. Mm-hmm. One thing we want to make very clear, though, is even though you're going to learn all these refinements and all these other things to enhance your abilities with EFT, that doesn't take away from the fundamentals. What you've learned so far is very powerful, and that is, if you will just simply tune in to the problem, be it a physical or emotional, and do the basic recipe and do it with persistence, a lot of things happen.
Right.
Okay, and we don't want to get away from that at all. We're just going to add some things to that. We're going to assume, so this is the advanced part, that you've already read EFT Part 1. And you've used the basic recipe on yourselves, and you've experienced it, and so you have all the fundamentals down, because we're going to build from there. We're also going to assume you've read the EFT Part 2 manual, or right. The parts of the manual that is EFT Part 2. And that's going to include, and it's very important, the legal stuff.
Oh, yeah.
That whole section about the legal stuff, because Adrian and I are personal performance coaches, and while EFT is impressive, and you should have experienced that by now on several levels, and we have very little in the way of negative side effects. That doesn't mean you won't have negative side effects, and obviously we cannot take responsibility for what you're going to do with it for yourself or for others. So
Right.
we want to make sure that you've read that and you understand that, and we proceed on that basis.
And we're very clear that we're not physicians nor therapists, and therefore you're to use, if you choose to use EFT, you'll use it right along with the advice from your physician or therapist.
Sure.
So we're very clear on that. Actually, EFT Part 2 is a blend taken from 2 separate seminars.
2 3-day seminars.
Right, and what we've done here is that we've taken parts of both seminars and blended them together to be the best teaching tool that we could give you.
Yeah, it wasn't just the best sessions, by the way, where people got over things magically and right away, although that happens with great frequency. We're showing you things that illustrate all these points for you.
Right.
And what you're going to see here is kind of a condensation of all that you're going to see on this tape, I should say, a condensation of all that you're going to see in the future on that.
Right, right. What we suggest that you do to make best use of these tapes is that as you put each tape in, set your counter to 0. Therefore, you can keep a log of the places that you'll want to go back and review. And you will want to do a lot of reviewing because we're firm believers that repetition is what you're going to have to be doing to really master these tools.
Yes, and we use repetition a lot, and you'll see it here. But let's turn now to another section. We're going to kind of recap Part 1.
Good.
Okay.
Now it's time to revisit EFT Part 1. Gary, why don't you start with the discovery statement?
Okay. The discovery statement, as you already know, is the fundamental concept behind all of EFT. And it goes like this. The cause of all negative emotions is a disruption in the body's energy system. And I want to take that sentence, if I can, and just pull it apart a little bit. The cause, let's underline the word cause. The cause of all, underline all, negative emotions is a disruption in the body's energy system. When we say the cause, we're talking about the literal cause. We don't mean it's a contributor to. We mean it literally causes the negative emotions and all that spews off from that we correct by balancing the energy system with the basic recipe. And the interesting point about it is the cause of all negative emotions. That is why we will take this process, and it's the same basic recipe, the same routine, and we do the same thing for the fear of public speaking as we do for a traumatic memory, as we do for any other emotional thing or physical thing that we address with. It's always the same thing, because the cause is all the same. It's sort of like the zzzt that goes on in a television set if the electricity in that television set isn't flowing normally. You get this kind of picture aberration and sound aberration if something's wrong in the TV. Now, your emotional system acts the same way, and that is if the electrical system in your body does not flow normally, then you're going to get this, and that is what you're feeling when you're having some kind of a negative emotion, and that is what is contributing to so many physical ailments that the EFT tends to address so marvelously. Now, the interesting thing about that is if you were to take your TV set with a zzzt in it to a TV repair person and say, would you please repair my TV set? They're going to say, sure, but they're going to diagnose it. They have equipment to diagnose what's going on where inside that TV set. With EFT, you're not learning diagnosis. That is the next level above this, where you can learn that diagnosis and you would know right away what was going on in what part of the energy system and where to tap. So EFT, with the basic recipe, gives you kind of an end run around that. It's sort of like we overhaul the entire TV set, if you will. It's like the TV repairman. If he didn't have any way to assess what's going on in there, what's wrong with it, he could just replace every single part and your TV set would work. Well, that's what we do with emotional freedom techniques. We use the basic recipe, and by tapping on all of the meridians according to this 1-minute procedure that you learned in EFT Part 1, we balance the entire energy system. And it works marvelously and corrects the problem in, well, you've seen how many times so far. It has a very, very high success ratio. Let me see. What we need to do now is to take, again, the fundamental idea of this whole thing. And this is repetition. But what you need to do is tune in to the emotional problem, use the basic recipe, that is, fix the zzzt going on, and do it with persistence, and a lot of magic happens. One of the things that you've learned so far that may appear to be an impediment to the process is what we call aspects. And that is, a given problem can have several little pieces to it. And sometimes you'll be doing this and it will seem like you're not making any progress, but what you've really done is emotionally shifted from one aspect of something to another. And while that's not really an impediment, it seems that way because you don't seem like you're getting any better. Or at least your progress may seem to be arrested, and all that really is you need to address another aspect. A great example of that is what you saw in EFT Part 1 with Dave and his fear of water. When Dave and I were in that chair working on his fear of water, he was talking about water coming up, this far up to his chest, and he would get very intense about it, even go very rigid, and maybe even think he was going to die. And so we did tapping for that, and you remember when he got in the water came up to his chest, and he was fine. He had absolutely zero problem. But then when I asked him to hold his nose and go underwater, whoop! Other aspects came up. And it's the awareness of the aspects that's very, very important. You're going to see aspects in the rest of these tapes in EFT Part 2 many, many times, and you'll get very familiar with how they work and so on.
And actually, that is a very important point, that you really need to understand aspects so that you'll be very persistent in using the procedure over and over and over again. If you don't understand aspects, as you had mentioned earlier, we can't say this enough, you may give up on the process and say it doesn't work. That's where persistence just locks in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it will not appear to you, as newcomers, that you're making headway. But as you get more and more experience with this, you're going to see that persistence is something that's very, very important, because if you keep doing it, even though you may not be recognizing a certain aspect going on, and sometimes it's sort of invisible to you because you're just not used to them, you just keep doing it and keep doing it over time, and listen, it's next to magic.
That's right.
In many cases.
And our motto is that we try it on everything, absolutely everything. I got a call a few weeks ago from somebody who had asked me if we'd ever worked with MS, and we had not. And I went ahead and said, we'll go ahead and try it, and got marvelous results with it. Actually, that was a few months ago that happened. And we tried on everything from hiccups to headaches. It just doesn't matter because you have nothing to lose by trying it.
You'll see on the tapes coming up, we had a lady in one of our seminars that had heart arrhythmia. Now, Adrian and I are not physicians,
right?
And I wasn't that sure what it was. I knew it was some kind of an irregular heartbeat, but she happened to have her physician with her. You'll see this on the tape. And so we tried on everything. Why not? What does it hurt?
Right.
It's a 1 minute process. Maybe you do it 2 or 3 times. What does it hurt to give it a try on that? We've worked on it for itching and all kinds of issues. So there's nothing sacrosanct about this. You want to try it on everything. And before we leave this section, I want to mention one other part about recapping Part 1 that's important. That's the idea of generalization. Quite often we will find that if somebody has a number of issues, like in the 6 days at VA, if you recall Rich on there, Rich had, in his words, 100 intrusive memories, he called them.
Yes.
War memories that were bothersome to him and kept him awake at night and so on. And we dealt with 3 or 4, I think, there on camera. He dealt with 3 or 4 on his own. And after that, he just simply couldn't find intrusive memories that caused him all that emotional pain anymore. I mean, he could still find the memory, but the emotional pain was just gone. It's like we knocked down everything, covered over everything, having covered 8 or 10 of them, and we got all 100 of them.
Yes.
That happens with this, and it's a glorious piece of it. I think it's just delightful.
Yes.
But it's one of the things I want to make you aware of as we recap Part 1. So from there now we're going to start going into some of the Part 2 things, and namely some of the impediments to perfection in this. So.
Good.
Okay, it's time now to get into some of the concepts behind EFT Part 2, some of the advanced refinements. And the first section is going to be on impediments, or maybe we should say apparent impediments to EFT working.
Things that get in the way.
Things that get in the way. We've already talked about aspects, and those are what we call apparent ones, because they're not really in the way. It's just more to be addressed is all. It's not something blocking it, okay?
Yes.
There is something that, however, that can block it on very infrequent occasions. And it doesn't happen very often, but when it does, you'll need to know how to correct it. And it's called the collarbone breathing exercise. That's the correction for it. What I want to point out here is that you're not really going to know when this occurs. And so the thing to do is if you have been persistent and persistent and persistent and you just don't seem to be going anywhere, this is something you may need to throw in. It will kind of clear the way in some cases, so it's important for you to know. So go ahead, Adrienne.
Right. So when you have gotten nowhere and you're stuck, this is when you'll be applying the collarbone breathing exercise. We have previously videotaped me showing this demonstration, so we're just going to go ahead and play that video for you now. What I suggest is that you go ahead and do it along with the tape so that you become familiar with it, and you'll be able to go back and replay it as you need it. So we'll go ahead and see the tape right now. All right, the next thing that we're going to do is the collarbone breathing technique. So do this along with me. Take 2 fingers of your dominant hand and put those 2 fingers on your collarbone point. One important thing that I want to point out here is that your arms are to be away from your body. The only thing touching your body are the fingers of your dominant hand. In order to do that easily, I also just tuck my thumb underneath my fingers like that. So put those 2 fingers of your dominant hand. We're going to start with the right side on your right collarbone. You're going to use your left hand to tap your gamut point on your right hand. So start tapping, and we're going to start by breathing in all the way. Hold it. Breathe out halfway. Hold it. Breathe out all the way. Hold it. Now breathe in halfway. Now breathe normal. Good. Now move those 2 fingers of your right hand onto your left collarbone. And we're going to repeat the process. Tap the gamut point. Breathe normal. Breathe in all the way. Hold it. Breathe out halfway. Hold it. Breathe out all the way. Hold it. Breathe in halfway. Now breathe normal. Good. Now take your right hand and we're going to make those 2 fingers into knuckles. We're going to use the knuckles of the 2 fingers. Tuck your thumb under, fold your fingers over, and the only thing touching your body now are the knuckles of your right hand. All right, put those 2 knuckles on your right collarbone. Again, we're going to tap your gamut point on the back of your right hand. Breathe normal. Breathe in all the way. Hold it. Breathe out halfway. Hold it. Breathe out all the way. Hold it. Breathe in halfway. Now breathe normal. Good. Move those knuckles of your right hand onto your left collarbone. Tap the back of that hand, your gamut spot. Breathe normal. Breathe in all the way. Hold it. Breathe out halfway. Hold it. Breathe out all the way. Hold it. Breathe in halfway. Breathe normal. Good. Now we finish with the right hand. We're going to repeat the entire process with your left hand. Take 2 fingers of your left hand, tucking your thumb underneath. Only those fingers will be touching your left collarbone. Tap the gamut spot on the back of your hand. Arms away from your body, remember. Breathe normal. Breathe in all the way. Hold it. Breathe out halfway. Hold it. Breathe out all the way. Hold it. Breathe in halfway. Now breathe normal. Good. Now move those 2 fingers onto your right collarbone. Tap your gamut spot. You're breathing normal. Breathe in all the way. Hold it. Breathe out halfway. Hold it. Breathe out all the way. Hold it. Breathe in halfway. Now breathe normal. Good. We're almost finished. Fold those 2 fingers over, tuck the thumb underneath, use just the knuckles of that hand and put it on your left collarbone. Tap the gamut spot. Breathe normal. Breathe in all the way. Hold it. Breathe out halfway. Hold it. Breathe out all the way. Hold it. Breathe in halfway. Good. Breathe normal. Move those 2 knuckles onto your right collarbone. Tap the gamut spot. You're breathing normal. Breathe in all the way. Hold it. Breathe out halfway. Hold it. Breathe out all the way. Hold it. Breathe in halfway. Breathe normal. All right.
I might add to that some people consider this process a little more difficult to memorize than the others, but it isn't really, because there's a pattern involved in it, and you've probably already picked it up, but I want to point it out to you anyway. You'll notice what Adrian did was he took 2 fingers of one hand, put on one collarbone, the other collarbone, knuckles, knuckles. The other hand was fingertips, fingertips, knuckles, knuckles. Easy pattern, and each time she did the same 5 breathing procedures, all the way in, all the way out, or halfway out, etc. So it's a pattern to go by. The other thing I want to mention about that is it really doesn't matter which sequence you use to put your fingertips certain places. That is, you can either start here and go to here, or you can start here and go to here. You can start with your left hand or right hand. What is important is that each of these positions that you have, you do the breathing process each of those times.
All right, good.
Just to carry through on that, one of the things that you're not going to see very often on the subsequent tapes to this one in EFT Part 2 is us using the collarbone breathing technique with people very often. And that's because it's not needed very often, number one. But number two, quite often as I'm dealing with people up on stage, Adrian will be working with people in this seminar that have issues, and she'll be doing the collarbone breathing because, it takes about 2 minutes to do, and when I do it on stage, it takes a little bit longer, etc. That's why you won't be seeing it very often. And again, it's not that often used. And once more, you will not know necessarily when you're going to need to use it. It's just something you throw in when it seems you're not getting any place.
Right, right.
And it will clear the way for you sometimes. So that's the important carry through we need to make here, I think.
Yeah, good.
Okay. So let's go on now to another name for the setup, which is the psychological reversal, and one of the more stunning standalone techniques in this whole process.
We're going to now go on to psychological reversal. We actually call it the setup. Yeah. Gary, why don't you start with that?
Psychological reversal is the name for Dr. Callahan's name for the phenomenons, which all by itself is a personal improvement tool that anybody needs to know about.
Yes.
We call it the setup just because we like to talk in terms of metaphors, and it's easier to describe, and it's sort of like if your emotional system is like a bowling alley, you need to set those pins up before you roll the ball down. So we call it the setup. You need to have the energy system unblocked, as free as it possibly can be, and that's kind of like setting up the pins. And then the bowling ball itself is the sequence, 9 gamut in sequence that you've learned as part of the basic recipe. But we put the setup in there, even though those bowling pins may already be set up. So you're not always psychologically reversed, as Dr. Callahan would call it. You only are sometimes. But see, because you can't diagnose, you don't know whether you're reversed or not. It's not something that just shows up in your body and says, oh, I'm reversed.
Right. So what we do here is we assume that you're reversed. That is, when you come across something that's stopping you, you assume that you're reversed. It's a very easy thing to do to unreverse yourself.
If you want to get over the fear of heights, you assume you're reversed against giving, even though I have this fear of heights, da-da-da-da-da-da. And that's what that whole process is about for the setup, or you do it here.
Right.
The stunning thing about it is the psychological reversal literally stops healing of all kinds.
Yes.
It'll stop EFT dead in its tracks. The sequence, 9 gamut sequence, will not work as long as psychological reversal is in place, or that is the setup, has not worked.
Right. It's as if you've run into a brick wall.
Yeah.
Can't go anywhere.
It happens about 40% of the time, but I need to be specific about that because it doesn't mean that 40% of the time that you use it, psychological reversal is going to be in the way. What we mean is if we took 1,000 people and dealt with 1,000 different issues, 40% of the time it's going to be in the way. It might be in the way for you a lot. It might be in the way for you not at all. It does, however, happen maybe 95 or even more % of the time for certain issues.
Yes.
Depression's one of those.
Right. Illnesses are
well,
another one.
It's particularly of the degenerative disease type, like MS and AIDS and cancer and things like that, lupus and that kind of thing. The other is addictions.
Yes.
People are psychologically reversed against getting over addictions, and that's one reason why addictions seem to be so hard to get by, because this actual reversal occurs. And as we discussed in the manual, what that really is the literal changing of the polarity of the energy system in your body. It's like having the batteries in backwards in a tape recorder. It just doesn't work. You're
going to see this graphically demonstrated on these tapes in EFT Part 2. Beautiful demonstrations of this on stage.
Yeah, you see, it's for us to talk about it, it's kind of an invisible thing because you just don't feel what's going on, but we're going to do what's called arm testing. And you'll see this on several occasions. You'll watch the strength in people's arms shift as they say certain things. They'll say things like I want to lose weight, for example, and you'll see their arm go weak as we push on it, even though consciously they really do want to lose the weight. But psychological reversal is in the way, and that's why willpower hardly ever works, because when psychological reversal is there, even though you have the goal to do it and the conscious desire to do it, if you're reversed, you're going to self-sabotage yourself. This is the literal cause of all self-sabotage. Now, we just kind of rambled on this, but I think it's important for you to know that we have built into the basic recipe this thing. Even though I have this, I deeply and completely accept myself, even though I have this, I deeply and completely accept myself, as a way to get beyond it. Well, what you also need to know is one of the first things you want to look at, if you're not making headway, is going to be doing the setup again to correct the psychological reversal, but do it more emphatically. Even though I have this, I deeply and completely accept myself, or rubbing here. Even though I have this.
Say it with all your heart and soul, really get into it.
And when you really get into it, usually routinely, the routine way does it. But we're saying if you're stopped someplace, go back and do that, and do it with emphasis, and you'll be surprised. More often than not, you're going to clear the way. You've set up those bowling pins, and now they get knocked down by the rest of it. So important for you to know.
Good.
Okay, we turn now to an interesting impediment to the progress of EFT, which is called energy toxins. And we're going to get into that in a moment, but I want to make a point. See, we're spending time here now talking about impediments to EFT, but I want to give a bigger perspective. Impediments are not usually in the way.
Right.
Now the psychological reversal can be in the way like 40% of the time, but we have built a correction for it into the basic recipe, so it's usually gone.
Right.
Collarbone breathing exercise happens with almost rarity in most cases, but when it's important, it's important. Right. And the same with energy toxins. So you will see, you've already seen in EFT Part 1, that we take care of 80-90% of the things that come to us pretty routinely. What we're talking about now is that other 10 or 20% that is not quite so routine, and how you can take care of it. And most of that, by the way, is done by doing a more emphatic psychological reversal. But now we turn to another one still, which is called energy toxins.
Which can't be of any surprise to anyone watching these tapes, because we live in such a toxic environment.
Yeah, and we put all kinds of things in our body and on our body, routine to us is to use soap, but actually soap is not a natural thing that goes on the body. It's full of chemicals, and you put hairspray in and toothpaste, and all these things can be chemically toxic to our system. But we're not talking about that. And many people confuse the fact that when we talk about toxins, they think we're talking chemical toxins, because that's the normal way you think about those things. We're talking about a very specific thing as an energy toxin that irritates the energy system and does not allow the psychological reversal, the setup to work, or any of the other processes to work. It just kind of irritates it so much that all the rest of it isn't going to happen.
Now, what's so surprising here is that the toxins that we're talking about really aren't necessarily the chemical toxins, such as alcohol or some form of a drug that you're putting in your body that you would assume just is not good for you. We could be talking about something as simple as a kind of lettuce that you're eating.
In fact, we had a fellow that headaches started to go away with EFT as soon as the lettuce, and also orange juice in his case.
Right.
Which brings me to a point. While the chemical things you were talking about, I think you said alcohol, and I'm going to throw in there coffee and tobacco, and I forgot what else you said. while these chemical toxins are toxic to the body chemically, they may also be energy toxins, and in fact those particular things happen to be on a list of fairly common energy toxins, but it could still be lettuce and orange juice or whatever. I want to give you an idea of that, and it's called the barrel effect. It's just kind of a metaphor, but you could take even the most healthy of foods. I think I use the example in the manual of carrots. Carrots, when they're growing, have natural toxins in them to, ward off pests.
Right.
And so if you eat a carrot, your body's designed to handle that toxin. But if you eat lots and lots and lots and lots of carrots, it's like there's a barrel in your body. We'll call it a carrot toxin barrel. And when you overflow that barrel, you've got a problem with the energy system at least, and maybe even chemically.
Which can really happen with any foods that you're eating.
Yeah.
If you're eating too much of something, it's going to eventually affect your energy system.
Yes. Now, why it's important here is these energy toxins tend to take two different forms of impediment. There are times when you'll be trying to do things, and you'll do the psychological reversal more emphatically, etc., in the setup, and it won't seem to work. And you'll even do the collarbone breathing, and that doesn't seem to work. Usually what's happening going on then is there's something toxic that's either in you or on you, and there's a couple of ways that it manifests itself. One is it will just stop things working at the moment. And we've often found, by the way, that if you just move from one room to another, or move from indoors to outdoors, there's something in that room or that house that has been bothering you.
Right. And we can really get good results once you just move from one room to another.
I was dealing with one fellow on the telephone who every time he sat in a chair, a given chair, he happened to be toxic to it, and he would even feel anxious around it. He went outside, but everything worked perfectly. Whenever he sits in that chair, something goes on with him.
Now,
again, it's fairly infrequent, but when it happens, you need to know it.
Yeah, you do need to know because it's a big block again. It's a big block.
Now, the other way that it works is it will just literally stop things across the board. That happens with more rarity still. Usually, if you wait till the next day and do the process again, whatever it was you had eaten that was in the way, it's dissipated from the system. You've changed clothes, you're in a different environment, etc. So you do it another day, another time, etc., then the toxic problem isn't there.
Right.
But sometimes it will be there with some people, and it will just stop things right across the board. We have a classic example of that with Grace that you're going to see on one of these tapes. And Grace just used persistence and persistence and persistence, as well as getting a number of things out of her diet. That's important. Now, here's something we need to emphasize to you. You're not going to know necessarily what foods are toxic to you, because or what things you wear, etc., would be toxic to you, because there's thousands of possibilities.
Right.
That's why we list in the manual this list of common toxins. If you get all those things out of your system, chances are really good. These are the common things. Chances are really good that you're going to make a lot of headway when these things are out of your system.
Right, and this is something also that you can play with. You can try some of these things to eliminate them from your diet and play with them so that you don't have to eliminate all of them, but you may sample certain things and then just be tuned into what is actually happening to you. Okay,
and chances are you will already know what some of these things are. You already suspicion it's coffee because you drink too much of it.
Right.
Or you just kind of get this feeling when you, I'm just using coffee as an example, but you already know that, probably at some level. Not always, but you may already know that. And of course you may say, well, I don't want to give up my whatever. But that's why EFT is, one of its values is that you can use it for getting over the cravings for these things. It'll be easy to get beyond coffee.
Yeah, some of them can really come as a surprise, though. I'll have to say this, because even when I was first learning the process and worked with Dr. Callahan, it was things such as bananas or grapes that I really had to stay away from. So
and typically there are things you do too much of.
Yes, the barrel effect can really come in there.
You overdo your barrel. Now, one other thing you need to know about the effect of toxins is you could get totally beyond some emotional or physical issue that's very important to you and have complete relief on it. This happened with Grace, by the way, in her depression and all the things that went on. But then you go off and you ingest or come in contact with something toxic to you, and it will just come, in some cases, rare, but some cases, come flooding right back. In Grace's case, she went off and ate malt balls, which was sugar. She hadn't had it for a long time. She did this, and all of a sudden she just had her worst day. Here came depression and all kinds of other things right back. And it wasn't until that stuff got out of her system that are all righted again. So you need to know that.
And that's a very common thing that we deal with people with panic attacks,
Yes.
high anxiety.
Yes.
It's really usually those cases toxins are involved.
Yes. Because people always ask the question, well, if I get these things out of my diet and then I make headway on my emotional or physical issue, can I ever eat the things again or use the things again? And the suggestion is, why? Because they're obviously, in a way, poisons to you. But if you wanted to, our experience is that if you stay away from them for 2 months, then they probably will not bring back the emotional or physical issue. But what they will do is just make you tired. Remember, they're called energy toxins, and they literally irritate your system, and they will tend to take your energy. So it's up to you. It's a trade you make, of course. But that's been our experience in it. So let's close this out by once again emphasizing we're talking about the not too frequent impediments to this process. And remember, have you ever heard this before? Let's go back to the fundamentals. EFT Part 1 says, tune into the problem, use the basic recipe persistently, which, by the way, if you use the basic recipe persistently, that means you'll be doing it at different times and different days. You'll be in different toxic environments, different diets, etc. It happens automatically, right, with persistence?
That's right.
You will get beyond most of it. Doesn't mean you'll get beyond everything. Exhaust these other avenues first.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now we're going to talk about shortcuts, and we know everybody loves shortcuts, and we have some shortcuts with EFT.
It's interesting we would even talk about shortcuts because EFT by itself is a shortcut. It's a 1-minute basic recipe which may have to get repeated a few times, but what's 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 minutes or whatever?
Right.
I mean, compared to, conventional techniques, this just takes us such little time. But we want to talk about shortcuts, and actually the reason we do that is because when I'm on stage, even though 1 minute doesn't seem like very long, when you do it with somebody and you go 3 or 4 rounds, it tends to get a little laborious to people that are watching. So we found that we really don't even need to do the whole basic recipe. Now, we're not suggesting to you that you abandon the basic recipe. In fact, we're doing quite the opposite. We're telling you, go ahead and use that basic recipe and do it, thoroughly, etc., and take the whole minute. But if you're a therapist, for example, and you want to do things faster, or you just want to be better at it and work with other people on it and yourself and want to do it faster, we're going into shortcuts, okay? As it turns out, in our basic recipe, the first thing that maybe would be obvious is the setup is not always necessary, is it?
No.
Necessary maybe 40% of the time.
Right.
Now, you do know that it's necessary almost always for depression, addictions, and degenerative diseases, okay?
Yes.
But for the rest of it, 40% of the time is maybe how often it shows up. So you could go ahead and do the basic recipe and skip the setup if you wanted to.
Yes.
But here's what you would do. Okay, and you'll see us do this repeatedly. We do this all the time on these tapes that are going to follow, when we're on stage. But you could just start with a sequence. Eyebrow, side of the eye, and so on, and on down. If you just did that sequence, and you stopped before you did the 9 gamut, and you just assess things. Well, okay, my emotional issue, my fear of whatever, gee, it really has subsided. What that meant was you got by the setup. See, you would not have felt better at all if the setup was necessary, because it would have stopped it, right? So you did that little part of it, and you missed the setup altogether, which means you could go ahead and continue that part of it, and so you missed 8 or 10 seconds of it, right? The other thing is, we have found you don't usually need to do the whole sequence, do you?
No, but and actually for the sake of teaching you, that's where we're recommending go ahead and do the whole thing so that you're sure that you're getting everything.
Yeah.
But then once you get proficient with it, that tends to be the time when you'll go to your shortcuts.
Yeah, as it turns out, all these energy meridians that we're tapping on are connected. And tapping right here, and we don't know this because we can't see the energy system, maybe tuning into something where there's some other tapping on your hand, for example, it's already done it. Mm-hmm. You don't know that for sure, but in our experience and what you'll see on these tapes is what we do is we start here and here and here, and we go all the way down the body until we get to under the arm, and typically we just stop right there and don't bother doing the fingers. And it works marvelously.
Right.
It works just marvelously. So here's a couple of shortcuts. Now, you could eliminate the setup, but if you don't get anywhere after the first sequence, you better go back and do the setup because you didn't get on the setup. And the other thing is you can do a shorter version of the sequence. Another thing you can do is you can eliminate the 9 gamut.
Yes, then you can go ahead and try it without the 9 gamut. If you're not getting anywhere, put the 9 gamut in.
So what you could do, and you see it again on the tapes, people will do this, forget the setup in some cases, da-da, 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 here, 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 you're using the reminder phrase all the time.
Right.
And you stop right there, and you don't have to go to the 9 gamut.
Right.
You can just go right, if they have anything enough, you can say, well, this remaining, this remaining, this remaining, this remaining. You can do that. Or you can go back and do the 9 gamut. You really have a bunch of choices. You can pull this thing apart and put it together. Always remembering the basic structure is to do that 1-minute basic recipe.
That's correct.
All these shortcuts we're telling you are not even necessary. Very important. You don't even need to know them. It's just kind of pulling it apart so you get a better feel for it. If you want to use them, do it. We do it all the time.
Right.
Okay.
Another shortcut is what we call the floor-to-ceiling eye
Yes.
roll. And this is a very powerful shortcut, and you would use it if you were almost down to a 0, but not quite. There's a little bit left to do.
Down to a 1 or a 2.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Then you do the floor-to-ceiling eye roll.
And Adrian's going to demonstrate that for you here in just a second. But the beauty of it is, with this, actually we call it a 6-second floor-to-ceiling eye roll because it takes 6
Yes.
seconds to do it. That could replace a whole other round, of the basic recipe. It could replace a whole minute's worth and do it in 6 seconds, and it works, quite often. So it's another little thing to do. You will see us do this a time or two.
I'll just go ahead and show it.
Yeah, go ahead and
okay.
show them.
Which you're going to...
They know where the gamut point is.
Right. So you're going to be tapping your gamut point, and while you're tapping it, you have your head straight ahead. Have it, don't move your head is what I'm saying. So while you're tapping that gamut point, the gamut spot, you drop your eyes to the floor, and slowly, to about the count of 6, you raise your eyes to the ceiling.
And just for emphasis, as you're doing that, you might want to just mention your reminder phrase, like this fear of whatever.
Fear of, or if I was working with a headache and it was almost down to 0, but not quite. Tap the gamut, drop my eyes to the floor, and slowly, thinking about my headache, raise the eyes to the ceiling. That's all there is to it.
Yeah. You either think about your headache or you even say this headache, which automatically has you
Right.
think about it. So,
Right.
Anyway, those are some of the shortcuts. You're going to see them frequently throughout all of this, just to let you know what they are. So you just know that much more about the intricacies of EFT.
You've heard us, or you will be hearing us, consistently using a metaphor of the forest and the trees, and we'd like to talk a little bit about just what that means.
Yeah, actually, it's an interesting little metaphor. If you consider all of your emotional issues as like a forest, sometimes that forest seems to be so thick that you're always, every time you want to do anything in your world, you seem to be bumping into yet another emotional tree in your forest, so to speak. And for some people, it's like a jungle, okay, and it's very thick, and it just seems like how are you ever going to get out of this, because every time you turn around, you're bumping into a tree. Well, one of the things that we like to say is every time we deal with an emotional issue with EFT, we're cutting down one of those trees. If you have a fear of heights, for example, there's a tree in your emotional forest, and we've taken care of that. If you have a traumatic memory of some kind, like an accident that you even have nightmares about, we can take care of that just as easily, and we cut down a tree. And after a while, your forest begins to thin out. And with the generalization concept we talked about, many times the rest of the trees just kind of fall, and you have the emotional freedom that is really the title of this whole effort and this whole course that we're doing. So we use that metaphor just to give you an idea of that. Now, sometimes the forest can be like a little individual forest. Like if you have a fear of heights, you could have a number of aspects involved with the fear of heights. Like a lot of traumatic memory you've had when you've been up high before and just got scared. And those are all kind of aspects to your fear of heights. So we're dealing with this individual or this specific forest, and so we're cutting down trees in this little forest, and we take care of that forest. Now we're in another forest. So this metaphor kind of moves from place to place, but get the idea of the forest and the trees and thinning that out so you can walk out of it, and you'll have this very useful tool for putting all this together. I thought you might like to see the process of EFT all on one chart, so while this is in your manual, I thought I'd go over it for you just to give you an idea of it. The first thing you do is identify the problem, and that's obvious. And I'm just going to assume for the moment that we have a problem called depression. So you have a problem called depression, so you identify it. And you always want to be specific where possible. If you had a problem which you would call self-image, well, self-image isn't necessarily a very specific problem because it's made up of lots of smaller contributing issues. But anyway, we're going to use depression here. So we identify the problem, being specific when possible, and then we apply the basic recipe. You can use the shortcuts, of course, a partial basic recipe, maybe using the setup, maybe not, maybe using a part of the sequence, maybe not, for just getting eye roll, the things you talked about before. You can use shortcuts or just do the whole basic recipe as you choose. And once you've applied the basic recipe, being tuned into this problem, you're going to have one of three results. You're either going to have no relief, or partial relief, or complete relief. 80% or more of the time you'll be spending your time right here, complete relief or partial relief. If you get complete relief, which happens with great frequency with this, one round through and it's just all gone, you'll want to test and reapply it if necessary. Now, in the case of depression, how do you test that? Well, you start to think about something that would normally depress you if you wanted. If you don't get depressed, well, then you've tested it and you're probably done with it. But if you do test it and you get some emotional response back, then you want to reapply, go back to the top and reapply as necessary. If you have partial relief, then you'll just apply another round of the basic recipe, but this will be the adjusted one, the one that starts off with saying, even though I still have some of this depression left, I deeply and completely accept myself, etc. And the reminder phrase would be this remaining depression, and so on. And you'll keep doing that until this partial relief becomes complete relief. Test and reapply if necessary. If, however, on the infrequent occasion where you get no relief whatsoever, then you want to take a look at some of the things that are in its way. The setup is one of those. It's a possibility. That's probably the first thing you want to look at. So what you would do in that case is you would do the setup more emphatically. Even though I have this depression, I deeply and completely accept myself, etc. And rubbing the sore spot very hard and doing it very emphatically. The other thing is to recognize you may just be dealing with more and more aspects of it, and you're not done with them. So just keep doing persistence, and the aspects will start to fall by the wayside. Then you might want to do the full basic recipe instead of just the shortcuts. That's another way to approach it if you're getting no relief. You may want to do the collarbone breathing exercise, which is something that happens, as we talked about, it happens infrequently, but that's another thing you may want to use. It may clear the way for this no relief to become complete relief or partial relief and be on this side of the chart. And finally, if you're just hitting a wall and not getting any place, you want to take a look at energy toxins. You want to start getting things out of your diet. You want to start being a detective, if you will, as to what things seem to be bothering you in one way, shape, or form. And basically, that's the essence of it. That kind of gives you everything together. Now, I'm going to wrap this up here for you, but I do want to mention something to you. Another way to look at this is, as we've been emphasizing, all you really need to do is to tune into the problem and use the basic recipe with persistency. And that will take the place of a lot of this chart. Okay, this is for those who want to get more technical still. Okay, we're going to spend a little time wrapping up, and we're going to get on to the rest of these tapes.
Well, we're all ready to wrap it up, and what you're going to now see are stunning successes along with times when the process has been